Good evening and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the December 20th, 2016 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council, Holiday Edition. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you haven't already had an opportunity to do so, please pick one up and you can follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on tonight's agenda, as well as a segment under item 5, which is reserved for public comments of a general nature. At that juncture, if there are any members of the audience who have any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not on tonight's agenda, at that point we would invite you to come up to the podium, let us know who you are, and we would welcome hearing from you. But first, it is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'd like to ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much for joining us in that. I would now like to skip the motion to permit electronic attendance because Mayor Tully was able to escape New York and get back in town in time, so that motion is no longer necessary. And we will move right to item 2, which is my time to ask for our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, which pertains to minutes of prior council meetings. And we have 2 sets of minutes to review and approve tonight. Those would be our minutes from our executive session on November 22nd, 2016, and also our regular village council meeting on December 13th, 2016. If there are no changes, questions, or comments to either set of minutes, I will entertain a motion to approve both.
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the executive session minutes from November 22nd, 2016, and the regular council minutes from December 13th, 2016, as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. Next, that brings us to item 4, which is reserved for presentations. And we have some very important presentations to make tonight. We couldn't think of a better way to wrap up a wonderful 2016. The first is a proclamation, which is recognizing many years of service to our community. And we're very glad to acknowledge this organization for their impact upon our community and making it a better place. I'll read the proclamation. Whereas Community Adult Daycare is celebrating its 30th anniversary, having opened its doors in 1986, and whereas local churches identified the need for adult daycare to service the frail, elderly persons in the community, and whereas the organization was formed to provide a safe, dignified, pleasant environment for adults needing daytime care and to offer families an alternative to full-time care in the home. And whereas Community Adult Daycare began as an all-volunteer organization and in 1987 was incorporated as a 501c3 organization. And whereas Community Adult Daycare has resided in the lower level of Gloria Dei Lutheran Church in Downers Grove since its inception. And whereas the mission of the center is to serve adults with cognitive and physical disabilities by providing a social program to enhance the quality of life for the individual and their family. Now, therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim December 20th, 2016 as Community Adult Daycare Center in the Village of Downers Grove in celebration and recognition of their 30 years of contributions to the Village of Downers Grove. Thank you. And I would like to ask Susan Newstrom, Director of the Downers Grove Community Adult Daycare Center, as well as any of your Board of Directors, to please come up, and I'd be honored to present you with this certificate. Actually, it's a proclamation. It's better than a certificate.
It's a certificate expressing.
Please come up about right here. Let's come over here, Susan. Congratulations. Thank you so much. Congratulations. I'll let you hold that. Thank you very much. Round of applause.
on behalf of the Board of Directors and myself and our staff and our many volunteers, this is an honor to receive this, and we've served the community for 30 years. We're looking for another 30 years to be serving from the support of many people, and we are offering quality programs and just an exciting lineup for 2017, and we look forward to serving the Downers Grove community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. 30 years, that's terrific. Thank you very much.
There.
Commissioner Waldeck, of course.
Thank you, Mayor.
Point of order.
No, as a board member of the Community Adult Day Center, I'd just like to appreciate the proclamation. It's a fabulous organization. We all know a lot about caregiving for the children. There's a lot of daycare centers for children all over the place, KinderCare and that. And the children are brought to these centers so that the caregivers can work. Maybe they're pursuing a career, or maybe they just need time away from the day-to-day to take care of themselves. We all know that in order to be good caregivers, they need to take care of themselves as well. They need to get to doctor appointments, and they need the time off. So there's a lot of reasons why children are dropped off. It's the same thing with these seniors as well. Whether they have disabilities or they have a hard time getting around. The caregivers also need the time maybe to pursue a career or time off to take care of themselves. And the seniors that are in the center are given, it's socialization and to maximize their potential. They're still learning new things. We help them remember things. It's not just a drop-off time. They actually have a lot of activities and things to get them involved in, and to keep up their possibilities for their potential, even to learn new stuff, as I said. So, fabulous group, and would like, if anybody's interested, they can call the Community Adult Day Center at Gloria Day and have a visit and get to know what's going on there. We need volunteers as well as clients. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Commissioner. We appreciate you sharing that. And thank you again. That brings us to the second part of our presentations segment of our agenda tonight. And this is also a very special segment. And I want to preface it by saying that as many folks in the audience know, the village is privileged to have a number of volunteer boards and commissions that help us do our job. These are all boards and commissions that are purely volunteer. These are residents who want to get involved and serve on a board and commission and in various different areas of expertise. And they make recommendations to the village council on topics such as public works, pensions, land use, technology, community events, the library, various other elements that are critical to our community and making it a great place that it really is. We could not do our jobs without those volunteers who have served over time in those capacities. These are mostly recommending boards, which means that sometimes they make recommendations that we agree with, and sometimes they make recommendations that we don't agree with, and sometimes we do something in between. But my colleagues and I, this council and prior councils, couldn't possibly do their jobs as well as we have without the foundation that was laid by our boards and commissions by really getting into the nitty-gritty of an issue, entertaining public input and public comment on important topics to the community, and then bringing all that forward to us in a comprehensible manner that allows us to do our jobs and village staff to do their jobs better. So we'd like to recognize those who particularly have served on boards and commissions for a considerable length of time, and tonight is one of those opportunities. We have a number of members that we're recognizing tonight, but I'm going to focus on those who are here in the audience for some special acknowledgement. What I would like to do is I'm going to call your names and ask you to come up, and then I will come down and present you with your certificates. But on behalf of myself, the village staff, my colleagues, and the entire community of Downers Grove, we thank you for your service. And tonight we are recognizing a number of long-time serving board and commission members. And I will begin with Daniel Cazzo, for his valued service to the community as a 10-year member of the Plan Commission. If you would like to please come up. And I would also like to invite up Thomas Reed. Tom Reed has served admirably on the Library Board of Trustees, and I have to say that I was very glad to, many years ago, have recommended Tom's appointment on the Library Board, and glad to see that you serve so admirably. Next, Denise Rabata, also for her long and, I don't want to say long because that would be impolite, but exceptionally valuable and longstanding service to the community and the Plan Commission. I think Denise has served on a board or commission almost as long as, or if not longer, than I've been involved with village government myself. And so you're kind of going hand in hand with the village as far as I'm concerned. And then last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, Christine Frigo for her outstanding service on the Liquor Commission. Again, I think the Liquor Commission and Christine Frigo are kind of go hand in hand, and it's hard to think of one without the other. We want to thank all of you for your service. I'm going to bring down the certificates, and then I think I'm going to ask all of us to express our appreciation for your service to our community. Well, if I can ask you to come up over here, because we have all these X's on the floor, and I'd like to take pictures. Just sort of line up against the back here, if you wouldn't mind. I would greatly appreciate that. It makes it easier. Right. Let's start with Denise. Denise, thank you very much. Congratulations. And then we have Tom. Thank you very much. Congratulations. There you go. Give me that top one there. And Dan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's you and of course Chris. Thank you very much. Big round of applause for that. Thank you for coming out tonight. Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you for having
Merry
me.
Christmas to you.
Thank you,
Merry
Mayor.
Christmas. And somebody had asked me whether I should invite each of you to come up and say a few words, but given some of your tenures on these boards, I'm afraid that we might not get out of here by midnight. Just kidding. Thank you again very much, and thank you so much for coming out. And thank you to your families for their sacrifice to share you with us for all those years. I know some of those meetings can run rather late, so thank you very much to your families as well. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is item 5, which is reserved for public comments. As mentioned earlier, this is the opportunity for members of the audience, if they have any questions or comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda, we'd ask you please come up to the podium, let us know who you are, and we welcome hearing from you. Please, good evening. Couldn't resist.
Chris Frigo, 1918 Elmore Avenue. I hadn't intended to say anything tonight, but I want to say thanks to Public Works for having a big snow event. We have been doing some traveling lately, and to come home and to be able to see a big snow event like we had, followed by this horrible cold, and see trucks coming down our street not once but several times as the storm was coming, during the storm and afterwards, is something to be pretty proud of. And I've said this for years. I have family in neighboring communities who always complain about their snow removal plans, and I have to say, in the 26 or 7 years that I've been in the village, it just never disappoints. So thanks to all the people that get out there in anticipation of these storms, during the storms, and I know it's not just Public Works staff, but a lot of people step up to make sure that residents have clear roads, not just on the main roads, but also on our side streets. So I just want to say thank you, because it's much appreciated. So thank you for that.
Thank you for sharing that. It's also appreciated. Other questions or comments of a general nature from any members of the audience? Well, thank you for that. Moving right along then, that'll take us to item 6, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our consent agenda as presented?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on tonight's consent agenda? Questions from members of the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a couple items here, items D and E regarding STP funds, that's Surface Transportation Program funds. They go through a process that goes through DuPais's Mayors and Managers Conference. So it's an example of having an advantage of having a seat at the table and having input into the process. That doesn't mean that there's any favoritism going on, but we do have some input into the process, which serves both large and small municipalities. The funding goes through needed projects based on merit. So even if you're a small community, if you have a project that needs doing, goes through the process and gets funded. I mention this because Nan Newland and I both sit on the Transportation Policy Committee, and there are larger planning groups that have presented and have suggested different ways of changing the funding process. And it's rather obvious that if these plans go through and it was in control of another planning group, we might not be able to get these types of projects done, not only in our community, but in other communities in DuPage County. So having Nan on the committee is advantage. She's a well-respected member of the committee, and she spoke in favor of the process, and I commend her for that. She has, like I say, she has a lot of respect from that committee, and this is why we get this type of funding, and other communities get similar funding for their projects. So thanks for that. We need to keep an eye out to make sure that this process continues forward and doesn't get overtaken by something larger and less local. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those accolades. They are well-deserved. Thank you to our Director of Public Works for that continued service, which doesn't get publicly recognized, so thank you for doing so. And also for underscoring the importance of staying engaged in these different organizations and making sure that things don't happen beyond our control in ways that they shouldn't, putting it politely. Other questions or comments from any members of the council with respect to the items on tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously, and that brings us to item 7, our active agenda. We have several items on tonight's active agenda to vote on. First, item 7A. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 3300 Finley Road?
Martelli, I move that this council adopt an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 3300 Finley Road as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from any members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, that matter passes unanimously. That brings us item 7B as in boy. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance designating the property at 3300 Finley Road as a planned unit development, specifically number 57, and to allow for additional signage?
Martelli, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the Village of Downers Grove, Illinois, to designate the property of 3300 Finley Road, located at the southwest corner of Finley Road and Opus Place, as planned unit development number 57, to allow additional signage as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from members of the audience on this item? Questions or comments from any members of the village council? May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter also passes unanimously and brings us to item 7C as in Charlie. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending stormwater utility fees?
Martelli, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending stormwater utility fees as presented.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the audience on this item? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Seeing that there are none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. That matter passes unanimously as well. Brings us to 7D as in David. Do I have a motion to authorize a contract not to exceed $70,000 with Kane McKenna and Associates for TIF consulting services?
Martelli, I move that this council authorize execution of a contract for TIF consulting services with Kane McKenna and Associates, Inc., for a total amount not to exceed $70,000.
Second. Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Azay?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Nay.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The matter passes 6-1. That brings us to item 7. E as in Edward. Do I have a motion to adopt an ordinance amending mobile food vehicle vendor provisions?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council adopt an ordinance amending mobile food vehicle vendor provisions as presented.
Second.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? Questions or comments from members of the village council? Commissioner Barnett.
Mayor Tully, I'd like to propose an amendment. Move to amend the ordinance presented this evening. I'll describe it in a moment, but I've presented copies to everybody here, so it's a little easier to read than follow. Amend the ordinance as presented tonight by removing section 8.16.3, section 1, amending section 2 to read any convictions of any felony or misdemeanor and striking the word misdemeanor after which, amending section D of that same section to add as it relates to DUI or reckless driving as defined by ILCS 5/11-503, and then some clerical things, changing the numbering from 3 to 2 and from 4 to 3 for the balance of that section.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's a motion to amend on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second, so I'll ask for discussion from the council. Commissioner Barnett.
Thanks, Mayor. We've gone back and forth a bit over the last couple of weeks relative to background checks, and I think we generally landed at wanting to collectively retain background checks. At least that was, I think, the majority consensus. What this attempts to do is adjust that background checks. It doesn't eliminate them. It still makes it applicable to all employees, not just owners. But it tries to recognize, I think, what I heard was the general focus of concern, which had to do with certain activities and children in particular in our community. I think that the moving, that the idea that we're going to take anybody with any felony and prohibit them from this line of work, I think is too broad. And so this is an attempt at trying to soften that a little bit. We right now are still limiting operation to office parks and industrial parks. The odds of engaging younger public, certainly unattended minors, is small, if not zero. But more importantly, it still kind of balances, I think, many of the concerns, which still allows background checks on many of those issues that I think all of us would generally associate with our minor members of our community. There are just an awful lot of felony opportunities out there for people, and to suggest that all of those, as defined by Springfield, prohibit anybody from working at a food truck and industrial park, I just think is too broad. So it's an attempt at a step towards compromise and a step towards kind of incremental acceptance of food trucks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments on the motion to amend? Commissioner White.
Well, first I want to say that I'm sympathetic to the concerns. I also am concerned that all felonies might be a little too broad. I think that's something that's going to take a lot of thought, and I'm certainly not prepared to move forward on this evening, despite the fact that I do have sympathy for the underlying objective. I think there's a lot of other issues that we probably need to address in a holistic way other than this. Other types of licensing, there's a lot of pieces to this, and I will not be supporting the amendment this evening, but that doesn't mean I'm not sympathetic to the underlying objective.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other question, Commissioner Waldeck?
Thank you, Mayor. This was an experiment, barely got off the ground, so some changes were needed. Staff brought some suggested changes. The folks who were reluctant to open up a food truck business, they asked for additional territory. They complained about the cost of the license, and they complained about the fee of the background checks. None of them indicated that they can't operate a food truck unless they can hire felons or sex offenders or people who pose a danger driving on our streets. They didn't ask for that. We were just charged with territory and the fees. So I don't know why we're talking about something that wasn't asked for, and needlessly, it reduces needlessly the safety on our streets. I'm for making the territory changes and moving on. Like chickens, why ask for something, just toss it around? Why put in red herrings at this time and delay this process further? I know I mix chickens with red herrings, but, you know, it's near Christmas. But I'm just saying, I can approve what the staff presented, and I will not be supporting the amending motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate Commissioner Barnett bringing it forward. I happen to agree with the, it seems growing consensus that maybe this is an idea whose time hasn't quite come. Yeah, I am sympathetic toward the ideas here. I think it's worth additional study, and I think we need to make changes of this sort hopefully in the near future. Because I think there are felonies that don't belong as part of this list. Plenty of nonviolent offenses that shouldn't keep somebody from being able to work in a food truck just as they would work in any other line of work here in the village or elsewhere. So I'm not going to vote in favor of the amendment at the moment, but I do like the idea of making some of these changes, or at least changes in the spirit in the near future. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from council?
One more.
Sure. No, well, two more. Go ahead.
I should probably let you go first, Mayor. I guess, let me clarify for the audience who's not reading the copy, unless we get too far afield on rhetoric. My colleagues were each presented with a letter yesterday, and an example to highlight. I think I sense certainly that this isn't going to succeed tonight, but for example, retail theft over $300 is a felony. And so a high school kid who had a retail theft in his past, who was now 25, could no longer apply for a job in this condition. The things left in by my motion include violations of Illinois Controlled Substance Acts. They include any possession of controlled substances. They include offenses involving moral turpitude. They involve DUI. They involve reckless driving. Many of the things which, as I said before, are of concern and rightly of concern. It's probably true, I certainly can agree with Commissioner White that maybe some more vetting of this whole concept, but lest it be misunderstood that somehow this was an attempt at essentially just opening it wide up. That's simply not accurate. And why now? Mayor, I think we're charged up here with evaluating each thing that comes before us and throwing our 2 cents in. And so we've talked about this, and now we're at the point of actually acting, which is entirely appropriate. But I think it's any suggestions that there's last-minute red herrings is just kind of off the mark. So I do hope, as Commissioner White and Commissioner Jose said, that we'll take this up again in the future if it doesn't succeed tonight. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I appreciate the conversation from all of my colleagues. And just to take a few steps back, the whole concept of originally having a food truck ordinance or a mobile food vendor ordinance had a little trouble getting off the ground 2, 3, 4 years ago, maybe even longer, for various reasons. And then it became more of a front and center issue, frankly, because of the changing business environment in our own community. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is being responsive, if not even proactive, when it comes to facilitating economic success in our community, even if that may be viewed as a budding and nascent opportunity. All business opportunities that end up being great successes start out small by definition. And the original ordinance that was put into place, I think there was eventually support for putting an ordinance in place, but there were concerns amongst a number of people on the council at that point in time about scope and background checks and various things. And it wouldn't be the first time that we passed an ordinance with a lot of restriction on it because we didn't have any on-the-ground, real-world experience with how it was working out. And so we would add conditions and so on and so forth to see how it happened. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that we changed conditions on a special use in our community after having a couple of years of experience to see how it worked out, and we all decided, well, we don't need these conditions anymore. Let's remove them. So I didn't have any problem with having the conditions put out there in the first place to get this rolling. Frankly, I probably wouldn't have supported the background checks that we currently have right now, but it was part of a package to get it going so we could see what was really the experience out there so that we could then tailor the ordinance and tailor the experience to meet the mission of facilitating business opportunity in our community, a potential, something could lead to a brick and mortar restaurant, something the community had an interest in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't have any problem with revisiting this, and I'm grateful to my colleagues for revisiting the key issues that we don't have any disagreement on, which are scope of service, because clearly there's been a call for expanding that, and we're doing that. That's I think everybody's universally in agreement on that. Reducing the cost or the barriers to getting a license so that we can actually see trucks on the street, because we can't gauge very much how the experiment is working if we're not actually having some vendors out there on the street. So part of this is designed to get more people out there. And on the background checks, I've expressed my views on that. And again, I probably wouldn't have supported them to the extent that they exist in the ordinance now in the first place, but as part of a, let's go forward and see how things work out, and then we can go from there. And I'm also glad to hear that a number of my colleagues are interested in pursuing this or looking at that issue of background checks generally on a broader level, because I think there's now been a community conversation. And it wouldn't be the first time that some issue came up in the context of another issue. That's happened many, many, many times since I've been up here. And as long as it doesn't derail what we're trying to do, which I don't think this is, I think it's a healthy discussion to have with the community. Frankly, I think that the proposed amendment makes sense to me. These are reasonable changes that are designed to rather narrowly address one particular concern, and I don't hear necessarily that these are bad amendments, but that perhaps folks just aren't ready to address them now, and I respect that. For myself, I did look at them when they were circulated by Commissioner Barnett, and they make sense to me. I'm perfectly happy to support them. But if it doesn't pass tonight, I'm also recognizing and understanding that my colleagues will, as they've expressed, have an interest in looking at this down the road. Whether in this context, we'll see how these changes work, and if we facilitate more activity that we can then assess and measure as to whether additional changes are made, great. If we need to have a further conversation, which seems to come up every 2 or 3 years, about the dreaded ice cream truck, we can do that too. And I agree wholeheartedly that we shouldn't try to tackle that right now in the context of this endeavor, but we can look at that soon. In a few months, if not earlier, we'll be getting into our annual long-range planning conversations, and we can talk about what issues we want to tackle for the next 2 years, and that very well may be one, so we'll see. So just from my own perspective, I can support the amendment, but it doesn't go forward, as it sounds like it won't, then I look forward to discussing it further with everybody when we come to it. Any other questions or comments from the council? Then I'm going to ask for a roll call on the amendment. This is a roll call on the amendment, and then we'll have a roll call on the underlying ordinance.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Nay.
Commissioner Wallace?
Nay.
Commissioner Earl?
Nay.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Nay?
Commissioner White?
Nay.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The amendment fails, the motion to amend fails 5-2. That then brings us to a roll call on the motion, the underlying motion to adopt the ordinance changes without any amendment. Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The ordinance as presented passes unanimously. And that brings us to the end of our active agenda and on to item 8, our first reading, our workshop agenda. We have no items under that portion of the agenda, so I will have to skip my weekly conversation with Manager Fieldman until we get to item 10. That brings us to item 9, which is the mayor's report. And I do have a report tonight, and what I wanted to do is share with the council tonight, and I'm glad you're all here. Last week, Commissioner Wallace so desperately wanted to avoid my report on this that she tried to escape by not being here. In truth, it was her birthday. Happy belated birthday. You're entitled to miss a meeting to celebrate your birthday. What I wanted to share with the council is a brief summary of some of the takeaways from the recent National League of Cities City Summit that I attended in Pittsburgh. And I won't go through the entire conference, which is a multi-day conference, but just some things that I thought that I took away that I thought that the community and this council would be interested in. Not necessarily, and I've already warned staff that this isn't a list of to-dos, These are just some interesting things that I thought that other communities were doing that just would be of interest to us, and whether we ever decide to do something even remotely similar is for a whole other time. But let me take a step back and talk a little bit about National League of Cities. The National League of Cities is, as suggests, a national league of cities from across the country of all different sizes. There are cities that are as small as 500 people in the population, and there are, of course, major cities like Chicago, New York City, and San Francisco. And it's an opportunity for the leaders and the mayors, presidents, council members, staff of these organizations to come together and basically not only use it as an educational opportunity at the host city, which changes every year. This year it just happened to be in Pittsburgh. Every year it's in a different host city. There are educational opportunities at the conference with formal education programs, which I find to be very valuable, including one that's called Big Ideas for Small Cities. This is usually for cities of populations of less than 100,000, and that's very tailored and focused on and relevant to us. But the thing I find equally as important and as helpful to me in attending the conference is the informal conversations that take place with colleagues from across the country, because you find out that most cities have very similar challenges, but they deal with them in different ways, and there's always something we can learn from others. And I've always found that to be as equally important and helpful as the official program. And I just listed there some of the topics that are covered by the formal programs, things that of course are very pertinent to us, such as economic development, technology and data use, sustainability, obviously a big issue for Downers Grove, leadership, demographics, transportation, climate change, and cultural and social issues in the community. And obviously some communities have issues that aren't as important to Downers Grove, and then there are issues that are very important to Downers Grove that may not be of particular importance to other cities. With that, what I want to do is just go through some of the things that I jotted down as, wow, that was kind of interesting, and just want to share them with you. And again, big disclaimer, this is not a, we're going to do these things. Although in the past there are a few things that we've learned from National League of Cities that we have in fact implemented here in the Village of Downers Grove, but I just wanted to share these with you. So in no particular order, one idea that I thought was interesting is there are some communities, and I wasn't aware of this, that have something that is known in different ways as a senior citizen tax work-off program. The concept here is that seniors within a community can volunteer or basically work for their village, either working at Village Hall, they could be behind the counter, they could be doing various different tasks within the village, and in return, they basically earn a credit off of their property tax bill. And this has been very popular in a variety of communities, and once I did a little Google search on it, apparently there are quite a few communities that have something like this. I just wasn't aware of it, but it's something that's out there. And so the way it would work is, for example, seniors in our community hypothetically could volunteer at Village Hall or in some other capacity, and in return receive some kind of a tax credit or maybe a credit off some other fee like the stormwater utility fee or whatnot, assuming all this is approved by lawyers. But it's a way to both engage people more in the community and get some more assistance in the administrative department, and at the same time provide a little relief for those who may be challenged to meet some of their taxes on a fixed income. The next one, just sticking with the age-friendly theme for a moment, and this was something that was described by the mayor of Salem, Massachusetts. Yes, Salem, Massachusetts is known for something other than witch burning. Salem, Massachusetts has a age-friendly network and an age-friendly action plan. And apparently the American Association of Retired Persons, also something I wasn't aware of, maybe it's because I keep ignoring the card they keep sending me, has something called a age-friendly network, which is available. There's more information about that on their website. And it's a whole network of age-friendly communities. And someone might ask, well, what's an age-friendly community? Communities in the AARP age-friendly network are not retirement villages or gated developments or nursing homes or assisted living facilities. What membership means is that a community's elected leadership has made a commitment towards actively working towards making their town, city, or county a great place for people of all ages, not just children, but also for senior citizens. And as described by Mayor Kimberly Driscoll of Salem, Massachusetts, I can read it, but you can also read it as well. An age-friendly city welcomes everyone and adapts its structures and services to be accessible to all, including older people with varying needs and capacities. An age-friendly city encourages active aging by optimizing opportunities for good health and social interaction in order to add life to years. And there's a lot more information on Salem's website, which I've included there if you want to dig into this. But the bottom line is, as when you're developing your infrastructure and your walkable communities and making some of your land use decisions, taking into account an aging lifestyle and making your town an age-friendly community. So I thought that was something that would be kind of interesting. And both of those topics, if we thought there was anything worth exploring, might be something that the Human Services Commission might want to take a look at, as whether that's something we would want to pursue or not. Just a thought. I'm going to put this one up here just because I've been talking about the importance of municipal branding since 2001. And guess what? National League of Cities, there was a whole presentation about the importance of municipal branding. And branding isn't just for cereals and carbonated drinks and things like that. It's really important for municipalities. It's your image, and it's beyond just your logo. It's really, how do you stand out in a very competitive world? And as we've said many times in the realm of economic development, we're competing with everybody. We're competing with our fellow communities in DuPage County. We're competing with the city of Chicago. We're competing with other states. And in this day and age, we're competing with other countries to attract business, to attract other things. Standing out in that world and having an image that you want to be known for and then being recognized for it is very important. So I know as various things come up, and from time to time we talk about images and signage and things like that, having a brand is very important. And this has been a consistent theme since I've been going to National League of Cities, going all the way back to, I think, 2000-something, the first one. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that. The next takeaway was something I thought was very interesting. This is an initiative of Littleton, Colorado. They have a community-based conflict resolution center. This was fascinating. Basically, what they developed was a community-based mediation program where they hired a part-time professional mediator who then worked with 40 volunteers in the community who all received 40 hours of certified mediation training. And these individuals then will work with people who are having, let's say, neighborhood disputes in the community to help them resolve them themselves rather than through formal interaction with the village or, God forbid, the police department. And there's more information available on Littleton, Colorado's website about this program, but it's been very effective. And as much as we might not like to admit it, we do have our share of neighborhood disputes over fence lines and other things like that. And this program is one way of sort of having a peer-based mediation program for addressing that I thought was rather interesting. And also maybe something the Human Services Commission could look into, whether that's something that would make sense for our community or not. Being a tech guy, I really want to talk about this one for a moment. Autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles, we've all read about them, heard about them, but clearly they don't exist. They're like unicorns, right? In Pittsburgh, there are 50 autonomously driven Uber vehicles on the road that you can actually order on your Uber app on your phone. And an autonomous vehicle without a driver will show up and pick you up and take you where you want to go. And there's a picture of one right there. They had it in the expo floor, but those are actually driving around the streets of Pittsburgh as we speak. And I was struck by why Pittsburgh. I understand Mountain View, California, which is the headquarters of Google, but why would there be autonomous vehicles in Pittsburgh? And I was quickly informed that Carnegie Mellon University has one of the top advanced robotics programs in the United States. And they have not only invested a great deal in a pilot program in Pittsburgh, but apparently Uber has hired a number of people from the program to help launch this program. And they have a pilot program going on right now. And apparently the topography of Pittsburgh, including all its bridges, was part of the equation because autonomous vehicles have difficulty with bridges. There's lots of bridges in Pittsburgh, and so this was a good place to test it. Now, you'll be glad to know that there is a ride-along as part of the pilot program. So there is someone sitting in the passenger seat in the front, documenting what's going on and making sure things are working as they should. I don't know if there's that student driver second brake. I didn't get close enough to see that. But people are ordering these Ubers and getting in them and going from place to place in the city.
Did you ride in one?
I didn't get a chance. I was going to. They were offering them, but it was a very popular thing to do, and I just didn't get around to it. So why is this important for us other than it's kind of cool and George Jetson-like? Well, I was struck by a few things beyond the fact that they are actually here. The mayor of Mountain View, California, where they also have autonomous vehicles because Google has a very extensive program that's in place right now with vehicles driving around. The mayor of Mountain View, California made a very impactful statement. They said that they are planning on not only not building any more public parking structures, but they are planning on repurposing their public parking structures to something else because they see a precipitous drop in the need to have parking because of the increase in prevalence of autonomous vehicles in the next 5, 10, 15 years, which immediately resonated with me because as we and future councils think about making substantial investments in public infrastructure for parking, we may want to think about the long-term view on that. Not to suggest that we don't address parking issues now in the short term, but long-term, before we spend $20, $25, $30 million on a parking deck, for example. Not that we have one in the works, but it's just something to think about. And if you think that's crazy, I already know from planners both here and in other places that the parking requirements for new construction have been dropping over the last number of years, going from 2.5 to 2 to 1.5 to 1 to reflect the reduced number of cars. I'm not suggesting that cars are going to go away. I mean, my goodness, we still have horses, but there will be a lot fewer of them. And that's, I think, just something that we need to think about real long-term planning. It's happening. It's here, and I don't necessarily think we're going to have an autonomous Uber tomorrow, but it's certainly within our lifetimes. The other impact of this, of course, not just on infrastructure and parking, but also on sales tax revenue. And this is another conversation for another time, but if you think of our Ogden Avenue commercial corridor and the number of car dealerships that we have there, including the one that's going in right now, I think short-term that's going to continue to be an economic generator of sales tax. But again, long-term, if we're going to be seeing fewer and fewer privately owned cars, they're never going to go away. Let's not kid ourselves. No one's going to order a autonomous Lamborghini. That's not going to happen. There's still going to be car sales. But I think we need to factor that in the long-term economic impact of a changing world. So this is something that just really struck me, and I wanted to share that with everyone for long-term thinking. Speaking of planning for the future, the other thing, it was just an offhanded comment, I forget which mayor mentioned this during one of the presentations, but it was a mayor that said, you know, every time we do any construction in our streets and we have to open up the street for any reason, we put in a piece of conduit. Well, what's in the conduit? Nothing. It's just empty conduit. Well, why do you do that? We're creating an asset for the future. We don't know what you may need to run through the streets sometime down the road. Maybe we'll need to do something. Or maybe if we don't need it, we can lease it or even sell it to somebody else. So simply by putting some conduit in their street every time they open it up, they're creating an asset that either they can use or they might be able to use in the future. I just thought that was fascinating, something to think about. And the last takeaway point before I wrap up is something called embracing the maker movement. And the maker movement is a trend in which individuals or groups of individuals create and market products that are recreated and assembled, in this case, using unused, discarded, or broken electronics, plastics, silicon, or virtually any raw material or product from a computer-related device. And of course, we don't have any of those laying around. They're all over this room. The real idea here is not so much the maker movement, but thinking or rethinking what manufacturing is today, and the point that manufacturing today is not manufacturing of 20 years ago. 20, 30, 40 years ago, manufacturing was thought of big, smelly factories belching out smoke, a use that would be very incompatible with other uses immediately adjacent to them. And we're seeing that that's not the case anymore. We're seeing that there are uses that would be manufacturing by any definition in a way that can easily cohabitate with other property uses that wouldn't interfere with what someone would expect to be able to use their property for. What do I mean by that? What I'm talking about is rethinking land use and manufacturing being either adjacent to or even within residential may not have the same aversion today as it did many years ago because of the nature of the manufacturing and the maker movement that's going on. I know that not too long ago, this isn't quite on point, but just for illustration, we had the business that wanted to come into an office facility and basically sell online retail sale. It was NHL hockey gear. And there was some initial, well, wait a minute, we can't, that's not the use that we normally put in an office center, yet that use isn't bothering anybody, and it's a prosperous business, and why wouldn't we want to support that? So the long story at this point is that perhaps zoning codes need to be updated to support modern manufacturing and makerspace uses, which maybe some of you have already thought of this, but it was something that when I was sitting there listening to, I thought, well, you know, maybe we need to rethink some things. And as we're going through our comprehensive plan and our zoning ordinances, this might be something that provides us a new way of looking at things. So those are the takeaways. Like I said, I didn't want to summarize the whole program, but just some of the things that kind of went off in my head that I thought I'd share with you. The National League of Cities Summit next year is in Charleston, in 2017, I don't remember, usually in November. And if we get a chance or anyone is interested, let me know. Love some company going. Usually there's a delegate from DuPage County and from the Illinois Municipal League that usually has a meeting out there at the same time. And I've just always found it to be a very, very educational and sometimes enlightening experience. And it's an opportunity to sort of step out of your local environment and learn from different perspectives that maybe you would have been remotely aware of, but having the opportunity to focus on it in a tailored manner can be eye-opening. I just wanted to share that with everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to attend. And of course, I'd be happy to entertain any questions, if not tonight, at your leisure. And that's the end of my mayor's report, unless there are any questions at the moment. Hearing none. We will move to item 10, the manager's report. Good evening, Mr. Fieldman. How are you?
Good evening, Mayor Tully. Very well tonight, thank you. Just a happy holiday wish from the staff to the council and everybody in the community. That ends my report.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask for a village attorney's report, even though it's not on the agenda again. Ms. Petracca, item 10A.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy holidays. No report. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll move to item 11, which is the village council members' report, an opportunity for members of the village council to share with the community either items of interest or other goings-on in the community, or to report out on their liaison functions and various roles once we get all that situated. And I'm sure all of us will go through our holiday greetings for the community. So we'll start with the right, with Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to start by thanking those who were recognized tonight that served on our boards and commissions, and all of those in the community that do. It really is an invaluable service. I want to join the mayor and everyone here in thanking all of you. And want to wish everybody a happy, safe, and healthy holiday. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hope everything goes well, that we don't get too much snow, but that we still have a white Christmas. And hope Santa brings you what you're looking for. Thanks very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Happy holidays to you, too. Commissioner Burnett.
Thanks, Mayor. Merry Christmas to everybody, my colleagues, and our folks watching at home, as well as folks here. I also want to just say thank you, Mayor, for your taking the time to go to NLC kind of on our behalf. I know there's some personal enjoyment there, but it really is a help to us, and bringing that back and putting forth a little presentation. It's so easy to get pretty wrapped up day to day. And I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I don't know what'll come of that, if anything, but the exposure is good for our village, and thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for saying that. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, you gave me an idea of what I want for Christmas. Judy, that autonomous Lamborghini sounds good. If you can fit it in a sock, that'd be great. And I want to thank our neighbors on Willard Place. We have a great little neighborhood. I'm sure all of you do too. So I want to thank them. Staff, for those who are the indoor workers, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. For those of you who are stuck outside, really feel for you when the weather gets bad. And those of you who are on call for the holidays, we really appreciate it. My fellow council colleagues, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Earl.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy holidays, everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We won't see it again until after the first of the year. Also, the Downers Grove Library has had in excess of 960,000 items checked out as of the end of November. They're hoping to exceed 1 million. So if everybody could get to the library and check out a book or two, that would be great. With your help, they can do that. And once again, happy holidays, everyone. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wallace.
Just wanted to say thank you to our boards and commission members that were here tonight. Happy holidays to staff, to our community. Wishing everyone a safe holiday season spent with family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner White.
First, I want to second the thanks that have been offered by all my colleagues this evening, and other than that, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we'll see you in January.
Thank you. And for myself, I also want to wish our staff very happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. particularly since February came early this year. We appreciate everything you're doing out there in the elements, and to all your families as well. To my colleagues, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. Look forward to next year serving with you, and thanks to your families as well for the sacrifices they make to share you with the community so that we can all do the people's work in this way. And to everyone in our community, regardless of what holiday you celebrate, may it be a safe, happy, and joyous one. Merry Christmas to you, and may you have a happy, safe, and prosperous new year. We will see you in 2017, this being the last Village Council meeting of the year. And with that, I will ask for the last motion to adjourn of 2016.
Mayor Tully, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldron?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, we are adjourned. We'll see you in 2017. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Good night.